If it wasn't for that Social Security check, we wouldn't even need you here. That's what Marcus, my own son, said to me. The same boy who once slept on my chest, his fingers so tiny they looked like flower petals. The same child who would cry if I walked a few steps away from him at the park. The one who, years ago, would call for Mama when he fell and scraped his knee. That night, he didn't even look me in the eye. He said it standing on the other side of the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, as if it were an objective truth, a cold, unemotional fact, a simple equation. I was equivalent to an income, a monthly figure that kept the house afloat, nothing more. I had a wooden spoon in my hand because I was stirring the rice to keep it from sticking. The roast was already in the oven. Chloe had said she wanted roasted potatoes, so I made those too. It was sweltering, my back ached, and I'd spent all day cleaning and doing laundry because we were expecting company. But still, even then, I smiled when my granddaughter Skylar rushed in to give me a hug. She was the only reason I kept holding on. After Marcus spoke, no one else said a word. Chloe, standing in the hallway, offered a tight little smile. She didn't need to say anything. She had already won. I didn't say a single word either. I finished stirring the rice, turned off the heat, and with trembling hands, I untied my apron. I didn't know if I felt anger, sadness, or a lethal mix of both. I went to the laundry room, turned on the faucet, and splashed water on my face. I had to calm down. Not in front of them, not here. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the same bed that had been mine and Walter's, my late husband's, for almost 40 years. The room barely belonged to me anymore. The walls weren't mine. My things were reduced to one dresser and a box under the bed. The rest was for storage. My life had been compacted. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't cry. I had run out of tears, and as I listened to the low hum of the ceiling fan, only one question crossed my mind. How did we get here? Going back to the beginning isn't easy. Sometimes you prefer not to stir up what hurts, but now I know it's necessary. 3 years ago, after Walter passed, the house felt too large. At first, the solitude felt like a kind echo, a gentle whisper that left me in peace. But over the months, the silence turned into a pit. That's why, when Marcus asked me for help, I didn't hesitate for a second. "Mom, Chloe lost her job. We're behind on the rent and I don't know what to do." "Come here to the house," I told him without thinking. "There's plenty of space." They arrived on a January afternoon, holding Skylar's hand and carrying 3 large suitcases. I had prepared the guest room, changed the sheets, and even bought a new lamp. I was happy. I had my family back. Skylar hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "I missed you so much, Grandma." I thought everything would be fine. Over time, I started noticing small things. Chloe never looked directly at me. She was always busy, always annoyed about something. At first, I blamed it on stress, the pressure of unemployment, the adjustment. But then the comments started. "Your mom doesn't respect our space," she'd tell Marcus when she thought I wasn't listening. "She's always right here, acting like it's just her house." And it was mine, legally, completely documented in my name, but I didn't say it. I didn't want to cause conflict. Little by little, the house changed. I kept cooking, cleaning, and paying the bills. My Social Security check, though modest, covered the electricity, the gas, and part of the groceries. Marcus had found a job, but it wasn't steady. Chloe still wasn't working, even though she wore new clothes every month. And yet, I began to feel like I was in the way, or at least that's how they made me feel. One night, Chloe asked me not to sit down for dinner with them because they needed to have a private discussion. The next day, my chair was gone. They had taken it from the table. I became invisible, but I still made breakfast, ran errands, and took Skylar to school when Chloe had a migraine or was too busy. I became a shadow that maintained everyone's routine without anyone acknowledging it. Until one morning, Marcus asked if he could put the house in his name. He said it would be more practical for everyone, that it would be better in case of an emergency, that things needed to be in order. I looked at him for a long time, and I did it. I went to the attorney's office, signed the papers, handed over the deed, and trusted him. I never thought they would hold it over me. So, a month later, my room was downsized. My private bathroom was now shared. My independence had been erased. I was becoming a background figure. No one asked how I was. No one listened to me, except Skylar. She was still the light. Every night she would climb into my bed, even if Chloe got annoyed. She told me what she learned at school, drew me flowers, and told me she loved me very much. She was the only reason I didn't pack my things and leave. Though I now had nowhere to go, I had given everything away. That night after Marcus's comment, I understood something. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of poor judgment. It wasn't a thoughtless phrase. It was what he truly thought, what he felt, what he believed. And then, for the first time in years, I felt something inside me break, but not with pain, with clarity. I went to the kitchen. Everyone was asleep. I sat in front of the cold oven. I looked at the pot of rice, still warm. Then I took my old notebook, the one I used for recipes, and wrote a single sentence: I deserve more than this. The next day, I got up early, made coffee, did my hair, and put on the blue dress that Walter always said made me look like a summer sky. And I left without saying where I was going, without asking permission. I left not with a suitcase, but with purpose. I didn't walk far. I didn't have a clear destination, but my feet knew where to go. Sometimes the body moves ahead of the mind. I crossed 2 streets, past a bakery that still smelled of fresh dough, and stopped in front of a place I hadn't visited in years. It was a modest cafe with hanging plants in the doorway and wrought iron chairs out front. A wooden sign read, "The Gilded Teacup." I hesitated for a second, but I went in. She was sitting behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, and her glasses were perched on the tip of her nose. She looked up, and for a moment she frowned as if she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened. "Ellie!" Vivian exclaimed with a smile that gave me a piece of my youth back. "My goodness, what a surprise!" I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking. Vivian was my closest friend when we were young. We were inseparable until life took us down different paths. She chose to travel, study abroad, marry a man who she later divorced. I stayed in the neighborhood, married Walter, raised Marcus, and was a homemaker my whole life. She lived 1,000 things. I lived in a circle. Yet in that instant, I felt like time didn't matter. We hugged, as if we had seen each other yesterday. "What are you doing here?" she asked, pouring me a cup of coffee without even offering it, as if she knew I needed it. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just needed to get out of the house." "Then you're in the right place," she said, gesturing toward a table by the window. "No one rushes here, no one demands anything, and the coffee is always hot." We sat down, and in fragments, I told her what had happened. Not everything, not yet, but enough for her to understand that something inside me had shattered. Vivian listened without interrupting. Only once did she frown when I mentioned Marcus's phrase. Then she was silent for a few seconds. "You know what?" she finally said. "You were always stronger than you believed." I smiled, disbelieving. "You don't look it because you were taught to be silent, to sacrifice, to ask for nothing. But that's not strength, Ellie, that's submission. And you can get out of there." I didn't answer, but those words settled deep inside me like seeds. I returned home before noon. Chloe looked at me from the sofa, frowning. "Where were you? Taking a walk without telling anyone?" Marcus was worried. It was a lie. He hadn't even noticed my absence, but I didn't say anything. I went up to my room, closed the door, and lay down. Skylar came in shortly after. "Grandma, are you okay?" "Yes, my love, just a little tired." She curled up next to me. Her warmth was a balm. She told me about a drawing she'd made in class of a woman in a cape flying over a city. "She's a hero. I named her Blue Ellie." "After me? Of course. You are my hero." I didn't cry, but it was hard to swallow. That night, while everyone slept, I wrote another sentence in my notebook. I don't need permission to start over. The following days were different. I was the same person, but something had shifted. I no longer responded immediately when Chloe demanded something. I no longer rushed to set the table or wash the dishes the second they were finished. It wasn't rebellion. It was dignity, small acts of resistance that no one noticed at first. One Thursday afternoon, I went back to the cafe. Vivian was waiting for me with a tray of fresh muffins and 2 coffees. We sat on the patio. She told me about her travels and how she decided to open the bistro after her divorce, using her savings and a small inheritance. She showed me old photos. We laughed a lot. I felt alive. "Why don't you come more often?" she asked. "You could even help me with some of the baking. I know you're a fantastic cook." Working here. I don't see it as work. I see it as regaining control. I returned home with a mix of excitement and fear. That night, while we ate dinner, I mentioned casually, "I was at a friend's cafe today. She offered for me to help her with the baking." Marcus didn't look up. Chloe did. "Working at your age? Why?" "Why not?" "Because you don't need to. You already have a check coming in. Besides, who will watch Skylar when we're not around?" "Skylar is 12 years old. She can get to school herself, and I need something for me." Silence took over the table. No one supported me, but they didn't forbid it either, so I went back to the cafe. The first few days I felt clumsy, slow, out of place, but Vivian encouraged me. She taught me to use the register, how to operate the espresso machine, and how to organize the display case. She even let me decorate a corner with antique items I had stored at home: an old pendulum clock, a set of teacups inherited from my mother, a vase with dried daisies. Customers started coming in, curious about that nostalgic corner. I waited on them with a smile. I felt useful, visible, valuable. One day I met Omar. He walked in slowly, a cane in hand, and offered a polite smile. He ordered a tea with honey and sat down to read the newspaper. He returned every Thursday. Sometimes we talked about books, other times about politics. He told me he was a retired lawyer, intelligent, kind, always well-dressed. He liked listening more than talking. He made me feel respected. One afternoon, as we were closing up, Vivian gave me a mischievous look. "I think Omar likes you." I laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous." "Why? You are a beautiful woman, Eleanor. You've lived, you've loved. Why couldn't you do it again?" I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't ready to think about that, but it was nice to hear. One Friday when I got home, I found my things piled up in the living room. Clothes, books, a box of photographs, my sewing kit. Everything was out of my room. "What is this?" Chloe, with her arms crossed, answered without flinching. "We need space. We're going to remodel and turn that room into an office. We've set up a corner for you in the laundry room. There's a cot." I gasped, not because of the humiliation, but because of the sheer coldness of it. "And Marcus agreed? He signed the papers, remember? The house isn't yours anymore." I didn't answer. I walked over, picked up one of my photos, me with Walter and a tiny Marcus, and hugged it to my chest. Then I went upstairs. I slept in the laundry room, but that night I wrote one last sentence in my notebook. "The day they stop underestimating me is coming." I barely slept that night. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. The laundry room smelled of damp concrete and old detergent. Every noise in the house was amplified between the cement walls. But more than that, what kept me awake was the memory, not of what had happened that night, but of everything I had allowed before. I thought about the years I cooked every dinner with care, the times I took care of Skylar when she was sick, the nights I got up quietly so as not to bother anyone. Every time I accepted a harsh word without speaking up. When exactly did I become an invisible presence in my own family? The next morning, I showered early and dressed as usual, in my favorite blouse and an embroidered scarf my mother had given me years ago. Chloe didn't even look at me when I left the house. Marcus shut himself in his study, claiming an urgent video call. I didn't eat breakfast. I wasn't hungry. I walked to the cafe feeling a weight on my chest that I couldn't shake off. But as soon as I opened the door of the gilded teacup and heard the little bell ring, something inside me settled. Vivian immediately noticed my expression. What happened now? They threw me out of my room. I'm sleeping in the laundry room. She stopped cleaning the coffee maker and stared at me as if to make sure she'd heard correctly. What do you mean they threw you out? They said they need the space. They're going to turn my room into an office. Vivian ripped off her apron with a sharp movement and walked closer. You can't keep allowing this, Eleanor. This isn't normal or fair or human. It's their house. Legally, maybe I have no rights anymore. Perhaps, but morally, they have no right to treat you like this. We were silent for a few seconds, then she took my hand. There are ways to defend yourself. I know someone who could help you. He's an attorney. Very good. His name is Omar. Omar, the customer? Yes. Sometimes he takes consultation cases, even though he's retired. He doesn't charge. He does it because he believes in justice. I don't know, Vivian. I don't want to take this to that level. And what level do you think this is? Sleeping among rags and buckets, seeing your things piled up as if you were trash? I was speechless. She was right. Every day that passed, I convinced myself that I deserved the minimum, that I should be grateful for a roof and a meal, even if everything came laced with contempt. But that wasn't the life I wanted. Omar stopped by that afternoon. Vivian had told him everything, and he, with that unshakable serenity, sat with me, notebook in hand. The first thing you should know, he told me, is that even though you deeded the house, if we can prove you did so under duress or without fully understanding the consequences, we could file for rescission based on undue influence. Furthermore, there is case law that recognizes the rights of elderly adults in contexts of family vulnerability. What does that mean in plain English? It means if we can prove you suffered manipulation or emotional abuse, you could recover your share, or at least secure a dignified space in that house, or receive compensation. I looked at him in disbelief. And how do you prove something like that? With witnesses, with your notebook, for example. If you keep a record of what has happened, that can help. And if Skylar is on your side, too. I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to involve my granddaughter, but I knew she was already involved simply because she loved me. I thanked Omar and promised to think about it. That night, I returned home determined to talk to Marcus. I waited for Chloe to lock herself in the bedroom and found him in the kitchen pouring himself a glass of water. I need to talk to you right now. No, Mom, I'm tired. No, now. Because if I don't talk, I'm going to get sick. Marcus turned and looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. What is it? Everything that's happening hurts me. It hurts to have given up my house, my memories, everything I built for you, and now I'm sleeping in a corner as if I were an intruder. It's not like that. Yes, it is, and you know it. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to be close, to be useful, to take care of Skylar. But you took my room away as if I didn't matter. Marcus clenched his jaw. He didn't say anything. After a moment, he left without responding. The next day, I sat with Skylar on the patio. She had a storybook, but she noticed I was distant. What's wrong, Grandma? I need to do something important, my love, and I might need your help. Her eyes lit up. Anything. Could you write on a piece of paper how they treat me here? I know you've seen it all. She lowered her gaze. Is it for a lawsuit? Not necessarily, but I need proof to protect myself. Skylar nodded slowly. Then she hugged me. I don't want you to leave. I won't leave without a fight. Over the next few days, Omar and I began to work in silence. He taught me how to document every event, how to speak without my voice shaking, how to look someone in the eye without dropping my head. Vivian supported me completely. Flexible hours at the cafe, advice, and, most importantly, company. I never felt alone in that process. One afternoon, upon returning home, I found my sewing kit thrown on the floor, some broken needles, threads scattered everywhere, my scissors rusted. It was my most treasured possession. I picked it up carefully. I went upstairs without saying a word, and that night, I knew the decision was made. The next day, I took all my papers to the cafe. Omar reviewed them carefully, then looked up. "We're ready. Just tell me when you want to start the process. Now." "Then be ready, Eleanor, because once you start, there's no turning back." I looked at him firmly. "I don't want to go back." We filed the suit on a Friday morning. Omar delivered it personally to the county courthouse, and he explained that we now had to wait for the formal notification to Marcus and Chloe. Despite the firm step we had taken, I returned home with a knot in my throat. I felt divided. On one hand, proud to have taken that step. On the other, devastated by the idea of facing my own son in court. But there was no turning back. It wasn't revenge. It was dignity. The following days passed in a heavy silence. I didn't say anything, and neither did they. Chloe continued to walk around the house as if floating in her own world, organizing things, giving subtle orders to Skylar, completely ignoring me. Marcus avoided eye contact. Only Skylar stayed close, sitting next to me every night with her books or just in silence, holding my hand. One afternoon, while I was making tea in the kitchen, I heard the doorbell ring insistently. I went to open it. It was a court officer. Marcus came down when he heard the voices and froze when he saw the man with the envelope in his hand. "Marcus Vance?" the officer asked. "Yes." "Judicial notification. You have a deadline to respond." He handed him the envelope, had him sign a receipt, and left. The silence that remained was like a crack in the middle of the house. Chloe rushed downstairs immediately, and seeing the envelope in Marcus's hands, snatched it violently. "What is this?" Marcus read aloud. His lips tightened. "It's from Mom. She sued us." Chloe looked at me as if I had just spat in her face. "What kind of low-down thing is this?" "A defense. I won't stay quiet anymore." She laughed contemptuously. "And what do you think you'll achieve? Taking the house from us?" "No. Just getting back my right to live with dignity, to not be invisible, to not be treated like old furniture." "This is a betrayal," Marcus suddenly yelled. "After everything we did for you." "What did you do for me? You took my room away, made me a burden, used my retirement check as if it were yours." Skylar appeared behind them without anyone noticing. She had heard everything. She walked slowly and stood by my side. "I support her, Dad." Marcus looked at her, surprised. "What are you saying?" "Grandma doesn't deserve this. I've seen how you treat her. It's not fair." Chloe let out an incredulous laugh. "Perfect. Now the child is taking sides too." Marcus looked down. He didn't respond. Chloe stormed up the stairs, and the bedroom door slammed shut. My son looked at me for a long time. There was no hatred in his eyes. There was something worse. Shame. Was this necessary? "Yes," I answered calmly, "because I tried everything else first. I talked, I endured, I made myself small, but you didn't change, and I don't want to disappear anymore." Marcus said nothing more. That night, the house was quieter than ever, as if something had broken and everyone knew it could no longer be fixed. The following days were filled with constant tension. Chloe behaved like a stranger. She would brush against my shoulders forcefully when she passed me. She left doors open so the noise would reach the laundry room where I slept. She changed the mealtimes. Sometimes they didn't serve me anything. But it no longer affected me the same way. I knew I had to write that down too, document it. Every offense became evidence. Omar accompanied me to the first hearings. Listening to my story in front of strangers was both humiliating and liberating. I told everything, how I gave the house out of love, how they marginalized me, how I slowly lost my place. Skylar wrote a letter that was submitted to the judge. Her words were so pure, so honest, that even the court clerk had to look away. My grandma has always been there for me. She took care of me when no one else could. I saw when they shut her out, when they stopped talking to her, when they pretended she didn't exist. I don't understand why anyone would treat the person who gave us everything that way. I read it to Omar in a steady voice. It was then I understood that my granddaughter had more courage than many adults. I smiled at her from the stand. She, sitting in the back row, returned my gaze with shining eyes. In parallel, Vivian became my rock. She gave me strength when I wanted to falter. She reminded me of who I was before all this. One day, she took me for a walk in a nearby park. She talked about her life, how she traveled alone in her 50s, the decisions that took her away from her family, the wounds and scars that took a toll to heal. Freedom doesn't arrive all at once, Eleanor. It's built, and it hurts. But once you achieve it, there's no turning back. That phrase echoed in my head. One morning, we received notification that a mediation hearing would be held. It was the last chance to reach an agreement without a judge's sentence. I went with a heavy heart. Omar explained that if Marcus agreed, we could set a written agreement. A private room, free access to the common areas of the house, respect, and a proportional part of the Social Security check for me. We waited in the small room. They arrived late. Chloe walked in as if she had come from a party. Marcus, on the other hand, had sunken eyes. When the mediator explained the conditions, Chloe stood up, indignant. "This is blackmail!" "It's an agreement," Omar said, "and it's voluntary. No one is forcing you. But if you don't sign it, we go to sentencing, and the judge will decide." Marcus swallowed. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he would accept, but Chloe touched his arm, whispered something to him, and he lowered his gaze. "We don't accept." The mediator nodded. "Then the trial continues." We left in silence. That night, without saying a word, I prepared a small box with some important items: photographs, old letters, a scarf my mother embroidered for me, and Skylar's letter. I hid it in a corner of the laundry room, wrapped in a plastic bag, as if it were a treasure, because it was. Not for its material value, but because it represented what they could never take from me: my memory, my truth, my story, and now also my decision to never be silent again. The following weeks grew colder, denser, not due to the weather, but because of the atmosphere inside the house. Everything became quiet, like a forced calm before an inevitable storm. I moved cautiously, as if every step could provoke a new explosion of shouts or harsh glances. Chloe seemed determined to prove that I had no power over anything, and every day she found new ways to do it. She changed the lock on the hallway bathroom so I could only use the one in the laundry room, which didn't even have hot water. She put latches on the pantry where they kept basic foods. She left me old bread, unsalted rice, and watered-down coffee. I didn't complain. I just wrote everything down. Omar had asked me to document every hostile act. I kept a notebook hidden among my books where I recorded dates, words, actions. I was no longer a resigned victim. I was a quiet observer, patiently collecting evidence. Skylar, for her part, was becoming increasingly rebellious. She started staying at her friend Brianna's house to avoid arguments. She asked her father to let her sleep at Vivian's house some nights. And although Marcus initially allowed it, Chloe quickly put a stop to it. She said Vivian was filling my head with nonsense and that she didn't want her daughter to be influenced by some crazy old woman. Skylar confronted her. I had never seen her yell like that. Chloe slapped her. I saw everything from the partially open door. I ran to my granddaughter, hugged her, and covered her with my body as if she were still a defenseless child. Chloe yelled at me not to interfere, that it was none of my business. Marcus came down late. When he arrived, Skylar had already locked herself in her room, and my hand was trembling on my chest. He didn't say anything. Not a word, not a reproach, not a comfort. He just looked at Chloe the way one looks at a fire, knowing that it has already burned everything. The next day, Skylar didn't go to school. She stayed with me all day, sitting in the shade of the patio, not saying much. I made her hot cocoa, the same way I made it when she was little. She asked me if I was ever happy. I told her yes, many times, although it had been a long time since I remembered it. She smiled sadly. "I want you to be happy again, Grandma." "Maybe that's not for me anymore, honey." "Yes, it is. You just have to believe it." That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Skylar still believes in me. I must start believing in myself again, too." A few days later, we received a notification from the county courthouse. The trial date had been set. Omar called me on the phone to explain the details. Hearing that we finally had a formal hearing made me tremble, not out of fear, but from the certainty that what was at stake was much more than just a dwelling. It was my dignity. It was my place in the world. Marcus and Chloe found out through the official mail. I didn't say a word. Neither did they. They locked themselves in their room and spent hours murmuring. At night, Chloe left the house without saying where she was going. Marcus stayed alone in the kitchen. I saw him sitting with his head in his hands, as if suddenly the entire weight of the universe had settled upon him. I approached him, not out of compassion, but out of necessity. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes were red, as if he had been crying or hadn't slept in days. "I don't know how we got to this, Mom." "Yes, you do, but you don't want to accept it. She told me that you wanted to take the house from us, that you were going to leave us on the street." "And you believed her?" "I don't know." I sat across from him. The silence between us weighed more than any words. "Marcus, I don't want revenge. I don't want to ruin your life or Skylar's. I just want respect, peace, a space of my own, a dignified old age without fear." "But you were fine before, weren't you?" "I was silent before. There's a difference." He said nothing else, just nodded as if he finally understood something. Not everything, but something. He went to sleep without looking at me again. The trial was approaching. Vivian took me shopping for clothes. She insisted I needed to present myself as confident, firm, like the woman I used to be. She did my hair, lightly applied makeup, and gave me a blue scarf she had brought back from Morocco. She said it was to give me strength. That morning, looking in the mirror, I saw myself differently, more upright, more present, as if I was finally beginning to recognize myself. At the courthouse, Omar was waiting for me with his briefcase. He was impeccable, calm, with that way of speaking that inspired confidence. He gave me some final instructions, and then we went in. Marcus arrived alone. Chloe refused to attend. Skylar was with Vivian, who had taken her to the park. I didn't want her to see all this. Inside the courtroom, the judge observed us carefully. He listened to Omar present the facts. He submitted documents, photographs, and testimonials. We read Skylar's letter. The judge asked for it to be read aloud. His tone changed as he read it. He paused several times, as if the weight of each word was too much to continue straight through. Marcus kept his eyes down. He didn't say anything until it was his turn, and then he offered an apology. Not excuses, apologies. He acknowledged his silence, his emotional abandonment, his complicity by omission. "My mother doesn't deserve to live like this. I failed as a son, I admit it." The judge looked at him gravely. "Are you willing to correct that?" Marcus nodded. The judge took a moment and then delivered his decision. Marcus was ordered to restore a private room to me, grant free access to the common areas, give full respect to my autonomy, and return partial control over my income. A formal warning was also issued to Chloe, who was required to refrain from any hostile action against me or face criminal charges. I left the courthouse in silence. Omar walked me to the exit. Vivian and Skylar were waiting for us outside. My granddaughter ran towards me and hugged me so tightly that I felt all my bones realign. "You won, Grandma." "No, honey, I just got back what I never should have lost." That night I returned home with my head held high. Marcus greeted me at the door and offered me some tea. He didn't talk much, but his gestures were different. Chloe wasn't there. She had gone to her mother's house, outraged by the ruling. I didn't know if she would return, and I didn't care. I slept in the room that was once mine, clean, tidy, with my things back in their proper place. I lit a candle, prayed silently, and for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. For the weeks following the trial, the house seemed to breathe differently. The air was no longer so heavy with tension, and while I couldn't say the calm was complete, at least the open warfare seemed to have ceased. Chloe didn't return right away. According to Marcus, she had taken time to think, although I suspected her real goal was to pressure him emotionally. I didn't comment on it. My role was no longer that of a mediator or a silenced victim. It was that of a woman who had decided not to permit any more abuse, regardless of who it came from. Marcus began to show small signs of regret. He would ask if I needed anything when he went out, or if I wanted to accompany him shopping. He even cooked a couple of times, something he had never done before. I accepted cautiously. It wasn't resentment that made me keep my distance. It was the desire not to confuse politeness with redemption. Years of neglect are not erased with a couple of kind gestures. Skylar, meanwhile, was getting closer and closer. She helped me organize my things. She spent afternoons with me talking about everything and nothing. She asked me to tell her stories about when her father was a boy, and as I recounted the good memories, I was also reconstructing the broken parts of my own past. One afternoon, while we were drinking hot cocoa on the patio, she said something that stayed with me. I thought adults couldn't change, that if someone was selfish or cruel, they stayed that way forever. But you changed, Grandma. You became stronger. Perhaps I didn't change. Maybe I just returned to who I was before I let myself be extinguished. Then I can change too, right? I took her hand. Her gaze held a depth I had never seen before. It was the look of a child beginning to understand the complexities of the world. I told her, yes, we all could change, but first, you had to have courage. And she already had it. A week later, Chloe returned. She walked into the house without greeting anyone, her lips pressed tight, her gaze lowered. Marcus hugged her as if nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. She passed me as if I were invisible. In her mind, she still resisted the idea that I had gained anything. She was convinced that her power was untouchable, but everything had changed now. Every time she tried to impose something, Marcus stopped her, not with force, but with a firmness he hadn't possessed before. He told her that things had changed, that she had to respect the boundaries that the law and cohabitation had established. Chloe looked at him with contempt, but held her tongue. She knew that any false step could turn against her. The tension returned to the house, though in a more hidden way. Chloe no longer shouted or confronted me directly, but she left small provocations. Dirty dishes left purposefully when she knew I needed them. Abrupt channel changes when I was watching television. Whispers on the phone where I was clearly the topic. I wrote everything down as Omar had taught me, but not for the purpose of reporting it, but as an exercise in clarity. Having a record helped me not to fall into doubt, into that emotional trap that had ensnared me so many times in the past. One night, I heard a loud argument between them. Chloe was yelling at Marcus that he wasn't the same, that he was letting a bitter old woman manipulate his life. He answered with a phrase I never thought I'd hear him say. "She's not manipulating me. She's reminding me who I am." After that, there was a long silence, then firm footsteps, and a door slammed shut. The next day, Chloe had left again. I watched everything without intervening. It was as if the conflict no longer belonged to me. It was between them. I was on the margin, and that margin was freedom. Omar called to check in. I told him the situation at home was tense but bearable. He asked if I had considered moving out. I told him yes many times, but I hadn't yet found the right place. He offered to help me look. He said he knew a few independent living residences for seniors that weren't nursing homes, but active communities with workshops, activities, and most importantly, independence. The mere idea scared me at first, but then I started thinking that perhaps I deserved to have a space where I didn't have to measure every word, every step. That night, Skylar overheard me talking on the phone and asked, "Are you going to leave?" "I don't know yet. What do you think?" "I think you should do what makes you happy. But if you go, I want to visit you every weekend." I hugged her. I was moved by her maturity, her loyalty. She was the reflection of everything I had tried to plant in this family, and although in many ways I had failed, a seed had germinated in her. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. It was my younger sister, Yvette. We hadn't spoken in years. She said she had heard what happened, having found out through a mutual friend who had seen the court ruling published in the public legal registry. She asked if she could come visit. I accepted with reservations. We had unsettled scores, old wounds that never quite closed, but something in her voice sounded genuine. Seeing her cross the threshold of the house, I felt a mix of emotions: nostalgia, mistrust, tenderness. We spent the whole afternoon talking. She apologized for not being present. I confessed that I had also kept my distance out of pride. Through tears and laughter, we remembered our childhood, summers at Grandma's house, and the mischief with our cousins. It was a necessary reunion. She reminded me that despite everything, I still had roots. I still had someone to count on. Yvette offered for me to stay at her place for a few days to take a breather. I said I would think about it. When she left, I sat in the rocking chair on the patio. The sun was setting, and the sky had that mix of golden and orange that seemed to promise something. I didn't know what, but something. At that moment, I felt a deep certainty. I didn't have to stay where I wasn't welcome, not out of stubbornness or pride, but because I deserved better. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting to stay, but deciding when to leave. And though I didn't yet know when that day would be, I knew it was approaching. As I went inside, I saw an old photo of Marcus and Skylar in a dusty frame. I picked it up, cleaned it, and carefully placed it on the mantelpiece. Then I went to sleep in peace, for the first time in many years, in true peace. After Yvette's visit, something changed inside me. It was as if that conversation had stirred up an old layer of dust, covering my memories. I began to understand that the problem wasn't just my relationship with Chloe, or even Marcus's emotional neglect. It was something deeper. It was the habit of making myself small so as not to bother, of being silent so as not to create conflict, of postponing my own desires to maintain a fragile family balance. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I was 66 years old, carrying burdens that weren't mine, accepting crumbs of affection as if they were feasts, waiting for recognition from those who only knew how to demand from me. I wondered why it had taken me so long to wake up, but I also understood that sometimes you only see clearly when you hit rock bottom. That clarity led me to make a decision. I started looking for places where I could live on my own. I didn't want a luxurious or modern place, just a space where I could have peace, dignity, and above all, freedom. I spoke with Omar. He sent me several options. I took my time to view them. One in particular caught my attention. It was a small apartment complex adapted for independent seniors, with gardens, a community library, and art workshops. It wasn't a retirement home. It was a living space designed for people who, like me, still had much to do, to learn, to feel. The thought alone of imagining myself there filled me with a mixture of nerves and excitement. I told Skylar about it. She looked at me in silence, and then, with eyes full of tears, she hugged me. She said she was proud of me, that she always thought grandmothers were meant to take care of others, but now she understood that they deserved to take care of themselves, too. That night, I slept with a new serenity. I no longer dreamed of the past. I dreamed of the future. Chloe returned a few days later, this time with a more contained, almost neutral attitude. Perhaps she had resigned herself to the new dynamic. She didn't try to argue with me or impose her presence, but she also didn't get close. It was as if I no longer existed in her world. She observed me with suspicion, as if she didn't understand why I was still here, so calm, so at peace. But I didn't care. I no longer feared her. Her contempt had lost its power over me. She was a woman without power when she couldn't manipulate, and that consumed her. Marcus started showing interest in my decision to move. At first he seemed confused, as if he didn't understand why I wanted to leave now that everything was calmer. I explained that it wasn't about running away, but about growing, that a person also grows at 66, that it wasn't abandonment, but a way to honor my history, my wounds, my process. He had trouble accepting it, but didn't prevent it. He offered to help me organize the move. I courteously declined. I wanted to do it my way. In parallel, I received an invitation from Vivian to attend a literary gathering at the Cultural Center. I decided to go. When I arrived, I was surprised to see so many women my age sharing stories, readings, and poems. For the first time in a long time, I felt part of something. I wasn't just Marcus's mother or Skylar's grandmother. I was Eleanor, and that was enough. At the end of the event, one of the coordinators approached me to invite me to participate in an autobiographical writing workshop. I hesitated, but I accepted. Writing was something that had always attracted me, though I had never dared to do it. I sat in front of the blank page and began to write my story, not with hatred or sadness, but with pure, painful truth. And as I wrote, I felt the words cleansing my soul. Each page was one more step towards my liberation. One Saturday afternoon, while having tea with Skylar, I told her I had chosen the apartment where I wanted to live. I showed her the photos, and her eyes sparkled. "When are you leaving?" she asked, with a lump in her throat. "Soon. I want to organize everything calmly. Can I help you decorate your new home?" "Of course, my love. It'll be our project." That complicity was a balm. We started planning the curtain colors, the type of plants for the balcony, and the pictures for the walls together. We laughed as if we were assembling a magical castle, and in a way we were. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from Vivian. She was in the city for a medical appointment and wanted to see me. We met at a cafe. Seeing her, I was moved. It was like reuniting with a part of myself that had been suspended in time. She listened intently as I told her everything I had lived through. She congratulated me for winning the lawsuit, for the decision to move, for the courage to break the cycle. She told me that many women live decades trapped in oppressive family dynamics, and that I was an exception. I didn't know what to answer. I didn't feel special. I just felt fed up, but I understood her point. Most people stay silent. I couldn't anymore. When I returned home, Chloe was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked at me with a mixture of challenge and annoyance. Without preamble, she said, "So, you're leaving?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "Soon." "And are you planning to take Skylar too?" "No. Skylar is your daughter. I am only taking my freedom." She let out a dry laugh. She gave me a sharp look. "Don't think this makes you a better person. Abandoning the house is just another form of cowardice." I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then I looked at her firmly. "I'm not leaving out of cowardice. I'm leaving because I finally understood that I don't have to stay where I'm not wanted. That isn't weakness, it's dignity." She left without responding. I sat down to catch my breath. The scene didn't hurt me, it didn't anger me. It confirmed that I was doing the right thing. The next day I started packing my things. Skylar helped me enthusiastically. We separated books, photos, and memories. There was a story in every object, but I no longer clung to them with sadness. It was a necessary detachment. A part of me was saying goodbye to this house, not as a physical place, but as a symbol of what I had tolerated for too long. Marcus would pass by occasionally, watching in silence. I noticed that it was difficult for him, but he also respected it. One night, seeing me organize my papers, he came closer and said, "I know I wasn't the son you deserved. I don't want you to punish yourself, Marcus. What matters is what you choose to do from now on." "Will you forgive me?" "I don't have to forgive you. I just want you to be better. For yourself, for Skylar." We hugged. It was a short, clumsy, but genuine gesture. Everything was ready. All that was left was to set the date. I sat down to write a list in my notebook of things I wanted to do in my new life. Learn ballroom dancing, take painting classes, visit small towns, read all the books I had put off, dream at my age as if I were 20, because the soul doesn't age when you nourish it. And then I understood that the end of one stage wasn't a tragedy. It was an open door, a new story to write. And this time, I would be the protagonist from the very first line. The morning I moved dawned gray, but not rainy. It was as if the sky respected my moment, accompanying me in silence. I woke up early. I hadn't slept much, not out of anxiety, but from contained excitement. I dressed calmly, made coffee, and walked through every corner of that house for the last time, a house that had been foreign to me for years, despite living inside it. Each wall seemed to whisper episodes that now dissolved like smoke. I didn't feel sadness. I felt closure, as if I were leaving a stage after playing a role for too long. Marcus appeared in the dining room doorway with puffy eyes. He didn't say anything. He hugged me. I caressed the back of his neck, as I did when he was a boy. We didn't need words. Skylar arrived shortly after, with a bright smile. She carried a plant in her arms that we had chosen together for my new balcony. It was a robust ficus, green, intense, and strong, just how I wanted to feel. She carried it proudly as we got into the car that would take us to the new beginning. Chloe didn't say goodbye. I didn't see her that morning. I didn't hear footsteps or doors, as if silence were her last word, and I didn't need it. Her absence no longer hurt. It was part of the relief. The drive was brief. Skylar talked nonstop, making plans for the next weekend. She wanted to sleep over, meet my new neighbors, and decorate my reading nook. I listened to her with a full heart. That girl had been my anchor in the midst of the storm. Thanks to her, I remembered who I was. We arrived at the complex mid-morning. The building had a modest entrance flanked by flowering bougainvillea. The doorman greeted us kindly and handed me the keys. Crossing the threshold of my new home, I breathed deeply. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibilities. Light streamed in through a large window, illuminating the space with a cozy warmth. Skylar ran to open the curtains and exclaimed that the balcony was perfect for our reading afternoons. We got to work, hanging the curtains, making the bed, and putting the books on a shelf. It was minimal, but sufficient. At lunchtime, we sat on the floor on a makeshift blanket and toasted with lemonade. She looked at me and said, "Grandma, this feels like a happy house." I replied that was because, finally, I was happy too. The following days were a dance of discoveries. I met Clara, my next-door neighbor, a 72-year-old woman who taught watercolor at the Cultural Center. She invited me to her workshop. I attended. My first brushstrokes were clumsy, but they made me laugh. I hadn't laughed like that in years. I signed up for a course on art history, another on meditation, and one on advanced writing. My hours filled with activities that nourished me. I wasn't rushed. I wasn't afraid. I felt like I was expanding. Every time Skylar visited, we shared our stories like two friends catching up on life. She told me about her school, her doubts, her dreams, and I listened with full attention. I wasn't the grandmother who only gave orders or advice. I was a woman who supported, who learned to listen without judging, and she thanked me with her sincere affection. One afternoon, while walking through the park that surrounded the complex, I saw a woman sitting on a bench. She was crying silently. I approached without invading her space. I offered her a tissue. She looked at me with surprise. She thanked me. We started talking. Her name was Naomi. She had recently lost her husband. She had no children. She told me she felt invisible, that no one listened to her. I told her about my own wounds, about how I had lived so many years being a shadow within my own family. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the same pain reflected in another face that I had carried in mine. Since then, we started seeing each other every week. We walked together, shared books, and cried without shame. Solitude hurts less when it is shared. A month passed. I felt more alive than ever. One morning, I received an email from Marcus. He invited me to lunch. I accepted. We met at a cafe near his office. He was nervous. It showed in the way he looked around. He told me he had started therapy, that he needed to understand why he had allowed so much hurt. He asked for my forgiveness again, this time with a different humility. I believed him. He talked about Chloe, how their relationship was deteriorating, and how he feared repeating patterns with Skylar. I told him the bravest thing he could do was break those patterns now before he caused more pain. We said goodbye with a long hug. I watched him walk toward his office with his shoulders a little less heavy. That night, I sat down to write in my notebook. I jotted down a phrase, "Love is not sacrifice. It is freedom." I repeated it several times like a mantra. It was my new compass. Days later, Vivian visited. She brought me a book she knew I would like. We sat on the balcony amidst laughter and memories. She told me I looked different, more radiant. I told her about my workshops, my walks, my fledgling garden. She congratulated me and hugged me tightly. I told her that without her help, I wouldn't have made it here. She replied that every step had been mine, that she had only reminded me that I had legs. That night, I slept deeply. One Sunday, Skylar suggested we make a video for school about the bravest woman you know. She filmed me recounting my story. I spoke naturally, without drama, only with the truth. The video went viral among her classmates. Several grandmothers felt identified. They wrote me letters. One told me, "Thank you for saying what so many of us keep silent." Another wrote, "I thought it was too late to start over, but now I know it isn't." I cried reading them, not out of sadness, but hope. My story, with all its blows, could help light the way for others, and that was a gift I hadn't expected. The deepest change, however, was internal. I no longer felt guilty for choosing my peace. I no longer doubted if I had done the right thing. I no longer wondered if they would ever thank me. I did everything for myself, and that wasn't selfishness, it was justice. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and recognized myself, not as the perfect mother or the ideal grandmother, but as a woman who survived her own history, who rewrote it, who made it hers, completely hers. One afternoon, I received a call from Skylar. She was crying. She told me she had a heated argument with her mother that she felt misunderstood. I told her to come over. When she arrived, she threw herself into my arms. She asked to stay for a few days. I made up her bed with tenderness. As she fell asleep, I stroked her hair and thought, how beautiful it is to be a refuge, not out of obligation, but out of love. How beautiful it is to offer shelter without losing yourself in the process. Then I understood something else, that true freedom is not being alone, but being able to choose who to be with. And I could finally choose. The end didn't come with a big explosion or a dramatic punch. It was a whisper, a moment of clarity in the midst of the daily noise. I received an unexpected call one afternoon. It was Marcus. His voice sounded softer, more human. He said he wanted to see me, that he needed to talk to me sincerely, without masks or reproaches. I felt my heart quicken, not out of fear, but because of the opportunity that was opening up. When he arrived, I received him with a mixture of nostalgia and hope. We talked for hours. He confessed how difficult it had been for him to understand the damage he had caused, not only to me, but to Skylar and himself. He admitted that Chloe had been a toxic influence in his life, but he also took responsibility for his own actions. It wasn't an empty apology, but a commitment to change, to be a better father and a better son. I felt something in our relationship rekindle, something I thought was lost forever. That meeting didn't erase the past, but it opened a path toward forgiveness and reconciliation. It wasn't easy or quick. There were moments of doubt, of pain, but also of growth. Skylar learned to trust her father again, and I found the strength within myself to release resentment and build a new story with them, though without forgetting the wounds. Because healing is not forgetting, but learning to live with the scars that make us who we are. Vivian continued to be my greatest support. Her friendship was a firm anchor in uncertain days and a celebration in moments of triumph. With her, I rediscovered the joy of sharing, of laughing without fear, and of dreaming without limits. Together, we planned a trip, a small escape we had always put off. It was an adventure that restored my confidence in the world and in myself. We walked through streets I never imagined seeing. We breathed new air and immersed ourselves in cultures that taught me that life always has more to offer, regardless of age. Chloe disappeared from the horizon, at least from my present. I didn't need confrontations or revenge. Her silent departure was enough. In its place, a peace I didn't expect to find emerged. That peace is born when you decide to leave behind what hurts you and make space for what nourishes you. I felt free from others' expectations, free from imposed guilt, free to simply be myself. The garden I planted on my balcony grew vigorously. Every green leaf was a promise, every flower a celebration. I cared for it with dedication. And sometimes Skylar and I would sit there to read, to dream, to plan futures that once seemed impossible. That connection with the earth taught me that life is a constant cycle of sowing, waiting, and flourishing, that one can be reborn as many times as necessary. My Social Security check, which was once a source of contempt, became a symbol of independence. With it, I learned to manage my finances, plan my expenses, and administer my life with autonomy. I didn't depend on anyone else to survive, to decide, to live. That gave me a dignity that no insult or contempt could snatch away. The day Skylar came home with a medal from an art competition, her eyes shone brighter than ever. She told me that everything she had learned from me had inspired her to be brave, to follow her passions without fear of making mistakes. That declaration was the greatest prize I could receive. My legacy was not material possessions or invisible sacrifices, but sincere love and the teaching that you can always start anew. Finally, I understood that the greatest gift I gave myself was allowing myself to be happy without conditions, without excuses, to be happy in my own way, on my own schedule, with my own decisions. That happiness was my silent revenge against those who doubted me. I didn't need to prove anything to them. My life spoke for itself. Thus, in this new phase, I built a home that was truly mine, a space where laughter replaced tears, where light conquered shadows, where love manifested in simple but powerful ways. A home that didn't depend on titles or possessions, but on the inner peace I had cultivated with so much effort. And as I write these words, I know my story is not unique or perfect, but it is real. It is the story of a woman who found her voice when many thought it was too late, who decided she deserved respect, affection, and dignity, who learned to love herself unconditionally and to let go of what didn't make her grow. Because in the end, it's not the check, the house, or the years that define a person. It is the capacity to reinvent oneself, to rise again and again, to move forward with an open heart, ready to receive the best life has to offer, that no one can ever take from me. Eleanor Vance. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect. And